All right, week 14 was another solid week of picks for me. 11-5 picking winners, 8-6 against the spread. You had a couple of games that didn't have a spread by the time I made the picks, so it is what it is. But another 11-5 week. Hey, not bad. And the season has ended up not being bad. 131-78 picking winners, 120-85 against the spread. Like I said, not the best out there, but still the most underrated sports talker here on YouTube, and somebody that you could have made some money with if you did all of my picks over the course of an entire season. Actually, potentially could have profited quite nicely. So you take that to be whatever it is, and it's easy to judge sometimes, but remember, whether you like it or not, I put these videos out there for eternity on the internet, so it can be tough sometimes because you have to take a stand that sometimes it's a lot easier to just type or tweet something or post a comment and say your picks and nobody really holds you to task for them. But anyways, let's move on. We've got 3 weeks left of the regular season, and it's actually, you feel like, starting to get really good, and this week in particular has some big type of monster matchups. Thursday night was not one of those matchups. It was Denver traveling to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. Surely somebody in the NFL thought this would, for some reason, be a marquee game this year. I don't know why. But they did. And unfortunately, that meant millions of people watched it on Thursday night. I watched very little of it, for which I could be thankful. I picked the Colts, even though they were 2-point underdogs, just because there really was no rhyme or reason, honestly. I mean, you could have picked either team. I don't even see why Denver was really favored here. I know they ended up winning by double-digit points, but I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, what did Denver do that was so spectacular that they deserved to be favored over the Colts? Just saying. So, obviously I missed there, but it was a game I really didn't care about, and it was a game I barely watched, because in the grand scheme of things, it meant nothing. Now, when we get to Saturday, you have two games that at least mean a little something, one that means a real lot of something. But we start off with Chicago and Detroit, and of course the Bears last week, since for the first time in over 2 decades I chose to not watch a Chicago Bears game. They decided to respond in kind with Mitchell Trubisky's best game as a Chicago Bear and blowing out the Bengals in the second half. Because of course, all the crappy games and the crappy seasons that I've sat through, the one game that I don't watch, they go on and blow the brakes off of the Bengals, which almost makes it tempting to watch this game against the Lions, especially because it'll be on NFL Network. And a lot of these games I have to watch via internet and so on. I don't know if I'm going to watch it yet. I still feel like I'm right to boycott them as long as John Fox is the head coach, but I don't know. We will see what happens. But in the meantime, they travel to Detroit to take on a Lions team that still has playoff aspirations at 7-6. They obviously will need to win out, and they will need a little bit of help. Part of the challenge for them is that both Atlanta and Carolina have head-to-head wins over them, so that could really come into play when it comes into wild card placement. So the Lions need quite a bit of help, even though right now technically they sit above the Packers and the Cowboys in the tiebreaker situation. In this game, you've got the Lions at home. They got something to play for. Honestly, the Bears really don't. The Lions usually do well in these type of games. They're favored by 5. Give me Detroit minus the 5. The real important game on Saturday, though, has to be the Chargers traveling to Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. You can make an argument that the Chargers are one of the hottest teams in football right now. They're playing some of the best football out of anybody in the National Football League. And on the flip side, you have the Kansas City Chiefs, who started off the season like gangbusters, and then it went quickly awry. They're still in a position, both teams 7-6. You feel like the winner of this game ends up winning the AFC West, and that feels right. It's just amazing how things are broken down. You would think with the Chiefs at home they would be favored, but they're not. The Chargers are favored by 1 here, and I think that has a lot to do with feeling the Chargers are a more balanced, more complete team. They've been playing better football the past month and a half or two. And this is a monster matchup because you look at the Chargers right now, everything seems to be pointing in their favor. Everything seems to be pointing in their direction, and you look at them and you say, if this team gets into the playoffs, they could be some problems for some teams. And I can agree with that based off of what we're seeing right now. Give me the Chargers to beat the Chiefs on Saturday night. Moving on to the Sunday games, the early games. You got Miami traveling to Buffalo to take on the Bills. We'll see whether or not there's any snow falling or any snow on the ground. The Bills are favored by 3. Both teams technically have some playoff aspirations still. Well, actually, Miami, even at 6-7, they were coming off of that victory over the New England Patriots. Pretty dominant victory, if you want to say. Whereas the Bills had to struggle last week in that Blizzard Bowl to beat the Colts in overtime. The Bills, though, sit in the 6th position in the AFC playoff race. Miami traveling up to Buffalo in December seems like a pretty tall ask. And again, whereas last week was the type of game where Jay Cutler shows you why somebody pays him $10 million in a season and will probably pay him that much money next year, it's a game like Sunday on the road with a playoff berth potentially at play here that you find out why Jay Cutler ultimately doesn't deserve that $10 million that he gets. Give me Buffalo minus the 3. Baltimore travels to Cleveland to take on the Browns. The Browns last week showed you something with Josh Gordon and Corey Coleman. And then, of course, you have Deshaun Kaiser, had a decent game. Not great, but decent. It felt like a different Browns team last week until the end where they ultimately ended up being the same old skid marks. Baltimore is only favored by 7, which you would find interesting because Baltimore played the Steelers really, really tough on the road, and the Ravens are right in the mix of the playoffs in the AFC. The Browns have nothing to play for. They're 0-13. But this is also a divisional game. Those rivalry games, they matter. Rivalry games, you just never know. And you feel like the Browns are about to screw it up and win a game when they just don't need to. Now, granted, you can say for posterity's sake, maybe it's okay for them to win one, because if they win one, it's not going to ultimately impact their ability to get the number 1 overall pick, and maybe they want to win one. But I say, humbug on that. If you're going to do it, go all the way. Anybody can win one game. It takes a special type of suck, see the 08 Detroit Lions, to go 0-16. It does. And you want to see history happen. Give me the Ravens minus the 7. Although, again, it feels like Cleveland could surprise. Cincinnati travels to Minnesota to take on the Vikings. The Vikings are playing for a first-round bye. They're playing for potential home field advantage throughout the playoffs. A win, and they clinch the NFC North. The Bengals really have nothing to play for. They just got blown out at home by the Bears. What in the world makes you think that they have any shot against the Vikings? And it's the NFL, you never know, but give me the Vikings minus the 12 all day. The Jets travel to New Orleans to take on the Saints. I'm not surprised the Saints are favored. I am surprised that the Saints are favored by 16.5. It seems like a massively huge margin, although, again, with McCown being out, you could understand it, but that is still a massive point spread. Obviously, I think the Saints will win, but give me the Jets to cover the 16.5. That's a monster spread. Philly with Nick Foles now in the fold with Carson Wentz's torn up knee. I'm sorry, Philly fans. I really am. As Carson Wentz, internet nut hugger number 1, I am very sorry. Believe that. They travel to New York to take on Eli and the hapless Giants. And the Eagles are still favored by 8 points, which I think is more of a reflection of what is perceived to be the balance of the Eagles team and just how much the Giants suck. I think the Eagles will win here. But just like last week, maybe the Giants can keep it close for a while. In this case, I feel like they could keep it even a little closer, and they'll cover the 8-point spread. But I expect Philly will still win because Philly's still got a lot to play for. New York's just playing for draft position. Cardinals travel to Washington, take on the Redskins. Give me the Redskins minus the 4. Aaron Rodgers is back, and couldn't come at a better time for the Packers as they're 7-6. They've got still a shot at the playoffs, but now they go on the road to face Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers. It seems like a pretty tall task. Come back in your first game and face off against that Panthers defense. Carolina's favored by 2.5, which obviously is paying a lot of respect to the potential return of Aaron Rodgers. Green Bay really needs this, and it seems like over the past few years with Green Bay, it feels like they always do their best when their back is against the wall. Now, Carolina is the more balanced, more complete, and just flat-out better football team. But sometimes you get somebody like Aaron Rodgers to come back, the best quarterback in the National Football League. He feels like, even though he's saying he's not supposed to be the savior, he is the savior, and everybody damn good and well knows it. Give me Green Bay plus the 2.5. We'll see what happens. Houston travels to Jacksonville to take on the Jags. I'll take the Jags minus the 12 all day long, because what in the hell has Houston shown you to say that they could be competitive in this game? The late Sunday afternoon games, the first big monster game has to be the Rams traveling to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. This has massive both playoff implications and divisional title implications. The Rams in previous years, the one thing Jeff Fisher could do is at least once, if not twice a year, find a way to beat the Seattle Seahawks. The first time they played this year, the Seahawks beat them. The Rams really need this game, even perhaps more so than the Seahawks, which sounds crazy with the Seahawks at 8-5, but it feels like the Rams really, really need this game. That said, it's still tough to go play in Seattle. A lot of attention has been paid to Russell Wilson potentially being an MVP candidate, and legitimately so. I feel like this is a statement game for the Rams, especially with the loss to the Eagles at home last week. They really, really need this one. Give me the Rams to win plus the 1. And then you've got Tennessee taking on San Francisco. San Francisco's actually favored by half a point, which shows you kind of the Jimmy Garoppolo impact when it comes to Vegas and just on the team in general. Tennessee has not looked that great. It feels like they're kind of backsliding into the playoffs. Now you've got a road game. Mariota hasn't been very good. Garoppolo, frankly, the past couple of weeks has looked better than anything Mariota has this year. But ultimately, the Titans have something to play for right now. I don't feel like the 49ers do, other than to see Garoppolo do something. Give me the Titans plus half a point. And your real monster game of the late Sunday slate has to be the Patriots traveling to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. This is the big one. This is the monster. This is the game that ultimately determines you would feel home field advantage throughout the playoffs in the AFC. You've got New England, who has owned Pittsburgh in recent seasons. You've got Pittsburgh, who's doing a better job than ever of winning games that they probably should lose, even though they still have the problem of playing down or up compared to their level of competition. They are finding ways to win those close games against bad teams in previous years that they have lost. And to me, you've seen that defense grow and improve a little bit, even though you didn't really see it Sunday night against the Ravens. The Patriots, that was a really bad loss going into Miami. And I know they've had some problems matching up in Miami in recent years. Maybe it was them looking ahead to the Patriots or the Steelers as a roster. I don't know. But that was terrible. It really feels like the Steelers need this game. They understand they have to have this game. They know that they can get this game. And they know if they beat the Patriots, they would go up 2 games with 2 to go. Think about that. With the head-to-head tiebreaker. This is literally for home field advantage for the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you really think about it that way, it is. Because even if they lost their last 2, and even if the Patriots won their last 2, they both would have 4 losses. The Steelers would still get it over them. The only thing maybe that would go into the mix would be if Jacksonville won out. That would be their danger. But by doing this here, you could say if, in effect, the Steelers potentially clinch home field advantage, they just need to win one of their last 2, and I would assume that they would. Give me the Steelers plus the 2 here. It's really surprising that the Patriots are still favored based off of the performance they had Monday night, but it's understandable based off of the history. But this feels like a different team. This feels like a different Steelers team this go around. Sunday night, you've got Dallas traveling to Oakland to play the Raiders. It's still a big game because both teams still, in theory, at 7-6, the Cowboys at 7-6, the Raiders at 6-7, still have a reason to feel like they can get into the playoffs, and they most certainly can. They both will need to win out and will need help, but they can get there. But it feels like the Cowboys have a better chance, and it feels like the Cowboys know that if they can win this game, they will get Zeke back the next week, and then watch out. Give me the Cowboys minus the 3. And then Monday night, you've got Atlanta traveling to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. The Falcons are 6-point favorites on the road, and legitimately they should be, because why would you favor the Buccaneers at this point in time? I don't really know. But again, this is one of these squirrely situations where you're talking about it's on primetime, so sometimes you never really know what you get in those primetime games. Furthermore, it's a divisional game, so you really never know what you're going to get there. And yes, the Falcons have a lot to play for here, and they have started to kind of, it feels like, turn a corner and come around in recent weeks. This feels like a real trap game for them, knowing that they still got to face New Orleans and Carolina the last 2 weeks of the season, I believe. This is not an easy closing stretch for the Falcons, and then having to go on the road like this, there's something about it. And not just Falcons hate or just to screw with the Falcons fans. There's something I really don't like about this matchup. So my big upset of the week, give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers plus the 6. Those are my picks for this week. We'll see what happens. You can give me your picks in the comments section below. And Falcons fans, flame away, feel like you got to do the dirty bird or whatever the fuck.